Hey friends, welcome back. You're listening to episode number 57. On today's episode, I get to chat with Stephanie Nichols, certified life coach, who focuses on helping divorced women bounce back after this major life change. Divorce sometimes comes as a surprise and sometimes it doesn't. Regardless, it is always stressful and feels like you have to start completely over and build your life from scratch. Stephanie helps us find the calm in all the uncertainty of divorce, and in this episode, we discuss how to pick the next right step, how to shift when things feel like they're headed in the wrong direction, and most importantly, how to have difficult conversations in any relationship, especially with your ex. Whether you are divorced or not, this episode has tons of tools to help you in your life. So let's dive in. You're listening to the Live with Audacity podcast. Hey girl, hey, I'm Melissa Stewart, mama to 4 kiddos ranging the age from college student to first grader, wife to a high school football and track coach, and a multi-passionate entrepreneur. Audacity is defined as intrepid boldness or disregard for normal constraints, and that's exactly what we have here. As a super busy mom who is easily distracted, I struggled to get focused on my goals and see results in my life and business. But I realized to make any progress, I needed to implement simple, efficient systems that worked for us without adding to the overwhelm and making me feel boxed in by rigid schedules. And I want to help you do that too. This podcast is aimed at giving you tangible tips and tools to get your life together, finally focus on the calling on your heart, and do it all in the way that works for you. So come on, boo-boo, it is time to get focused, get intentional, and live with audacity. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning back into the Live with Audacity podcast. I am so excited about today's guest. I have Stephanie Nichols here. She is a life coach for divorced moms. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And before we got on the call, we were talking about all the things, about divorce and, meeting new people and things like that, and the way the universe just brings us what we need exactly when we need it. Tell me a little bit about how you got into life coaching for divorced moms and why it's so important to you.
So interestingly, I have since I was a little girl, always wanted to be a teacher. And I grew up with 2 entrepreneurial parents. And so I had always kind of had this desire to help people. And so I went on to college and I went to be a music teacher. And so I taught for several years as a choral teacher. I'm also a singer, which is like one of my passions. And so I taught for several years. And then when my first son was born, I weighed the options of like, do I stay home? Do I go back to work? And at the time, I wasn't enjoying the position that I had. And I didn't really want to be away from my son. So I made the decision to stay home, and then found myself in the position of like, okay, what do I do now? And I didn't absolutely love being home like I thought I would, which was kind of a surprise.
Right.
Because I had, it was like I was a teacher by nature. So I loved that aspect of my life of like teaching my son about life and, like getting to watch him through the curious eyes of a child. But I wasn't enjoying every aspect of it. And I was feeling really unfulfilled. And then I had my second son 3 years later. And then it really got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to figure out something else. Like, this isn't fulfilling me. Like, I love my children and I love spending time with them. And I actually really enjoyed being home with them. But there was this piece of me that just felt really unfulfilled. And I felt like I wasn't contributing in the way that I wanted to the world, to my family, and to myself. And so this was before I got divorced. I got to a point where I just started to feel really resentful for the life that I had created. Like, I had wanted to be home and I had, I wanted all of these things that I thought were the things that I wanted, and then recognized that I was really unhappy. Like, I didn't like the life that I had created for myself. And then the only person I had to blame was me. And
Yeah.
so then I went on this mission to kind of like figure it out. And so I started, like, the first place that I went was the internet, of course, because where else do you
Right.
go
Yeah.
when you have a
Exactly. You
question?
don't ask your friends stuff like that.
So I actually typed into, like, Google, I was trying to figure out how to make money. And at this point, I was just like trying to find some way to make money where I could still be home with my kids. And so, long story really shortened up, I basically found all of these people, these women, amazing women online. And one thing led to another. And it was like I just kept meeting all of these incredible women. And through one of them, I found Brooke Castillo and the Life Coach School. And as soon as I found them, I was instantly hooked. And at the time, I was going through a lot of personal things, and the topic that was happening at the Life Coach School with their self coaching scholars program was all about relationships. And I was like, where do I sign up? So I signed up for this, and I started like just diving headfirst into it. And I was like, I wanted to learn everything that I could. I'm a lifelong learner, being a teacher by nature. It was like, give me all the things. So I
Yeah.
kept, learning about all of these things. And, then they have this program through the Life Coach School to get certified as a life coach. And I was like, okay, that sounds great, but I don't know, it's a lot of money. And I don't know if I want to invest in that. Like, I've got a lot of stuff going on right now in my own personal life. And, of course, I decided that would be a good time that I should write a book. So I was writing a book and navigating the challenges of, separation from my husband at the time. And then my book published last year. And I was like, okay, we're going through the divorce process. And then I thought, okay, now is a good time to get certified as a life coach. So I did the certification program, and then I certified last year with the certification program, and it completely changed my life. And what I realized is that one of the main things that got me through the whole process of, getting divorced and just navigating through what that looks like for me as a person, what that looks like for my family, what that looks like, specifically for my children. And I recognize the importance of doing that work for myself and how it impacted me so positively. And so at the end of the year last year, I pivoted my business because I had been coaching for, time previous to that, but I really wanted to contribute in that way of helping other women who are going through similar, circumstances, and be able to have my personal experience contribute in that way for other women, because I saw such a need for that. And I still to this day see how society views divorce, and how there's like a lot of commonalities of like what I've seen with women and how they experience divorce and like what happens for them. And I decided, like, this is where I want to put my efforts and my passion
Yeah.
into, like a way to give back, because it was something that I so greatly needed and had to figure out the hard way on my own of navigating it all by myself, and
Yeah.
decided I don't want other moms to have to feel this way. Like, I don't want other moms to have to go through this and navigate it, one, by themselves, and two, like, without having anybody who, like, having somebody who's been through it, or like having,
Talking to your married friends about it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about what are some of the things that women typically experience when they're going through a divorce?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is they lose their sense of like who they are, because you go through this period of time. It's almost like after you have kids. And I think a lot of moms can relate to this. After you have kids, you suddenly realize that, one, you can't maintain the same life that you had before kids, because it does
Uh-huh.
look different. And if you try to maintain that same life, sometimes you're going to, butt up with a lot of challenges and a lot of adversity, in which you can overcome, right? And you just kind of have to make decisions. But I think ultimately you kind of lose this sense of like, who am I and what do I want for my life now that I'm a mom? Your values shift, and your ideals and beliefs sometimes will shift. So I think it's very similar, like going through divorce. It's a lot of that same feeling of like, okay, I need to kind of rediscover who I am again. And I think the other piece of it is you kind of lose your sense of, um, stability, because
Ooh.
right? Like it just, your life is shifting so much that it's almost like you have to like pause and then kind of start over.
Yeah. And I think too, right, like it's like you're being literally plucked out of your life and everything that you expected from it. And like, okay, here's your new life over here. And you're like, you're looking around like you're in the desert, like, wait, but I don't know where anything is here. How do I
Yeah.
handle this? And what do I, and you have to totally, it's, you just have to, it feels like learning. Well, I've never had to learn to walk again, but it feels like you just have to relearn everything, how to interact with your kids, how to interact with, people of the opposite sex, or like talk to your friends because, they're going to have their own judgments or thoughts about it and whatnot. And it just literally can rattle you all the way to your core. And if you don't know that that's about to happen to you, or even if you do kind of know, like, here's what I'm about to do, it it's so shocking to your system. How do you help women feel the calm when it feels like everything is just totally out of control?
Yeah. So I start first by like with all of my clients, like when they come to me, I hold space for them. I give them this safe place where they can talk to someone who is not going to judge them, is just going to listen. And basically my job as a coach is to hold space and then to show them what's happening in their brain and to help them make sense of it. Because I think we get so caught up in everything that's going on in our brain that we don't pause to really make sense of what's happening. And so, as a coach, I will listen to everything that they have to say and then help them make sense of it by using a tool called the model. And we focus on like building a relationship with their self again and teaching them how to feel in control of their life. And one of the ways that we do that is by really focusing in on what are the thoughts that are happening in their life, like what are the main things that are causing them so much pain, and then we start to like create awareness around those pieces of their life. And a huge part of what my work is teaching my clients how to process through those emotions and letting those emotions be there, because we're not taught in school, at least I wasn't taught in school, that emotions are okay to have, and
Oh,
that,
amen.
or feelings, right? Like those are kind of interchangeable. We're not taught that those are okay. We're not taught how to like process them. We're not taught how to allow them to be there. We're taught that negative emotions are bad. And if you are experiencing negative emotions, something has gone terribly wrong. And so I re-teach that to my clients in a way that helps them understand that feeling negative emotion doesn't mean that something has gone wrong, and allowing that negative emotion to be there and like learning how to process through that is a super healing and therapeutic process that we can go through as human beings. And then once we're through that process, we can start to make sense out of what's happening and decide what we want to create in our life.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking while you were talking about how we are not taught that emotions are okay a lot of times, as kids or in school or whatever. I actually had that thought years and years ago as well, when I felt like every time my kids would, something would happen, or, they would fight and one of them would cry or one of them would get hurt. And it would just be like, okay, let's handle this so you can stop crying. Let's handle this so this emotion goes away. Right. And I realized one day, like, I'll bet if I let my kids cry and experience the emotion, maybe it won't feel so, what's the word I'm looking for? Overwhelming the next time that same emotion comes up. And so, yeah, I love that you said that we need to understand and learn that our negative emotions are good, not necessarily good, but they are, we need them so that we can understand where it's coming from, but also Because if you just try to shove it down, I guess is what I'm saying, then eventually it just explodes, right? And so being able to sit with it and process it and let it come so that you can feel it and then let it go is so valuable. And I think we don't do that enough.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to add on to that, like sometimes the negative emotion is important and it's there to tell us something, right? So we've got to be able to identify like how does that emotion feel in our body and what is it trying to tell us? Or like how does it feel in our body so that we can identify it quicker so we can process through it faster. Because I think when we are experiencing emotion, like what you had said, like we try to get rid of it as quickly as possible, especially if it's, quote unquote, a negative emotion. We try to
Mhm.
process through it quickly or try to push it down, shove it down because we don't want to deal with it. We think that it's something has gone wrong. But I think by allowing that emotion to be there and then recognizing it, it helps you to just identify it and process through it so much faster.
Yes, and I totally agree, and I think too, when you can identify where it's coming from, then later you can see that thing, kinda come to the forefront again, and you're like, "Oh, okay. Well, here's what I need to do so that I don't feel that again," or, just I need to this is how I need to deal with that this time.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Tell me a little bit about I know that your free guide is about having difficult conversations with anyone, probably, but was specifically your ex. Tell me a little bit about that and how the heck do we do that?
Yeah. So, this is something that I think like we can probably relate to this in many aspects of our lives, right? We oftentimes avoid having conversations with people if we anticipate there being some type of confrontation or conflict. And so I've developed this guide that really it's a precursor to the conversation and it's a way for you to really organize yourself and your thoughts before going into the conversation. So basically, when you're sitting down to have a conversation, and whether that's to write an email, to write a text, to have a phone conversation, to sit face to face, and this can be with anybody, we want to really get clear with ourselves about what is it that we want from the conversation. Because everything that we do or don't do in life is because of how we think we're going to feel when we do or don't do that thing. Everything. And so this is true of conversations as well. When we go into a conversation, we need to ask ourselves, like, how am I currently feeling about this conversation? And if you're in an energy space of like frustrated or vindictive or manipulative, like we can tell, like we don't like to admit it as human beings when we're being those things,
Totally true.
but you can sense that in your body. And if you're feeling in one of those energy spaces, that's probably not going to be the best place to start a conversation with any human being, whether it's your child, whether it's, a co-parent, whether it's a parent, whether it's a sibling or a friend. If we're in a space that doesn't feel good to us, we're probably not going to have the most productive conversation. And we're probably not going to create a result for ourselves that we enjoy or that we like. And so the first step is to kind of figure out, okay, what is it that I want to, like feel for this conversation? Do I want to feel open, curious, loving, kind? Like, what is the emotion that I want to have going into it? And a lot of times for me, it's a place of curiosity. Like, I just want to know more information so that I can formulate my own opinions about it. And I want to understand where the other person is coming from so I can tap into compassion and empathy for that person. Because I try to remind myself that everybody is a human being and everybody is an imperfect human being, right? Like we all are, myself
Mm.
included.
Yeah.
And when I can tap into that energy of like knowing that I'm also imperfect and I don't do everything, quote unquote, the right way, it allows me to stay in that place of curiosity and have compassion for the other person, which is a much better space to have a conversation with someone than being really closed off, judgmental, and even angry or frustrated. And so this process that I've developed, it just walks you through these 4 steps that you can take in order to prepare yourself for a conversation that, and I even put quotes around difficult, because difficult is subjective, right? And we don't want to go into a conversation thinking it's going to be a difficult conversation, because then that's basically going to create a difficult conversation, right? Because
Right.
anything that we focus our attention on is what we're going to create for ourselves. And so I walk you through these 4 steps to basically help you prepare yourself for getting clear on what it is that you want to create at the end of that conversation. And knowing that we can't control the other person, really what we can control is how we show up for that conversation and how we feel when we walk away, knowing that we showed up as our best self in that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so important to point out too, right? You have to set the intention of how you want the conversation to go rather than automatically assuming that the other person, your ex, whoever it is a jerk and they just want to challenge you just to challenge you and, just want to oppose you because that's their thing or whatever. When you set the intention that, hey, I'm going to show up to this conversation calm and without assuming how you're going to respond to it, and you can be very diplomatic about it, oh man, the results are so much better.
Yeah, and not even just for you necessarily, right? Like, because we ultimately are all very selfish beings by nature, even though selfish has a negative connotation. Like, we all are looking out for ourselves, right? And if we're being really honest, everything that we do, even with our kids, right? Like, we want to think sometimes like we do things for our kids that, like, well, I'm doing this because I want this for my children. But the reality is, like, we're doing it because of how we're going to feel when we think about what we're doing for our children, right? Or like the result that we're creating for
Yeah.
ourselves. It's all about us. And so when you can really, be honest with yourself about that, of like, the result that we're creating is always going to be about us.
It's true though. I love that. All right. So tell me a little bit about when you when you decided that this is what you wanted to do. How did you go about it? Did you just say like, "Hey guys, guess what? I am I'm a coach for divorced moms," or like what was your process getting into it? Because I think a lot of times people have ideas and they're like, "You know what? This was so helpful to me and I would like to teach it to other people," but they just don't really know how to start or where to start. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm trying to think. So I I think I've always just had this desire to help other people. And I think it just comes out of me naturally. Like, I don't think that it's something I necessarily even try to do. And sometimes it's maybe not even appreciated by other people that I do it. Um, but when I decided that this was the route that I wanted to go, like, I made the decision that I was just going to continue to figure it out. So it was like I started with some ideas, and being a creative person, I just let all of my ideas out. And I was like, okay, like, what is the best way that I want to serve? And when I wrote my book, I focused on the same process. It was like, in my book I talk about how to create calm, and it's a guilt-free journey to peaceful motherhood. So it's talking specifically about the same journey, but it's through now a new level, right? It's like a different lens, a different perspective. So it's a lot of the same process that I used when I wrote my book, and now I'm just applying it to like a different filter. And the filter now is divorce. Whereas before I was focusing a lot on women who were moms that were feeling overwhelmed and out of control and
Mhm.
possibly yelling at their children, taking it out on their children, feeling really resentful. And then I just created this new filter of, now it's not just a mom who's feeling overwhelmed, it's a mom who's also gone through divorce and what that looks like. And so I just used a lot of the same process from what I talked about in my book. And then I just started to develop it over time. And honestly, the biggest thing that kind of guided what direction I went and what basically developed out of it was going through the process myself and being coached through the process myself, learning about it. And I continue to learn about it. And I continue to grow and I continue to evolve. And as I continue to grow and evolve, then I take what I learn and I use the same tools on my clients. And so it's basically like this process of I just continue to keep growing and learning, but at the core of everything I do, it's building a relationship with yourself, feeling in control of your life. Like those are like the core pillars of what I teach. And it's really applicable to anybody. But I focus specifically on these women who I think I can relate to. And by being able to relate to them, they feel seen and heard. And when they feel
Mm-hmm.
seen and heard, they feel really connected. And so when you feel connected, you allow yourself to be vulnerable and you allow yourself to share. And that opens up then like the option of being able to give all of this information out into the world, right? Like in our sessions, they offer all of these thoughts to me that are really vulnerable thoughts in a space where they know they're not going to be judged. And then they're able to process through a lot of the things that they wouldn't be able to do on their own because I've done all this work myself.
Right. And you know the right questions to ask, right? It's when someone can be vulnerable and open to you and say the things that they need to say that they might not say to their friend or their mom or whoever, then you can ask the questions like, "Oh, okay, cool. Why do you think that? Where did that come from?" And things
Yeah.
like that. And then it really spurs them to think a little bit deeper about it. But when we're on our own and we're like, "Oh, I'm so upset about this," or "This thing is really bothering me," it just sits and it spins, right? Like in a little salad spinner, and just like woo, 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 going around and around. And you can't ever get off the merry-go-round to go, okay, like let's deal with this thought and figure out why it's there. Why is it making me mad? Why is it making me angry or whatever? So that you can get it out of there and move on and deal with something else, the next layer. So I think that's why coaching is so valuable. Oh man, valuable is like the best word I can label it with is knowing that you have someone that can help you sort out those thoughts and where they're coming from and how to process them. It's so valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree because I've like learned that personally, but then also like being able to offer a different perspective to someone who's not able to see it that way
Yeah.
is really helpful. And then on top of that, like knowing that I can share personal examples from my own life that help my clients know like they're not alone, right? It's like we all feel, I don't know why this is, but we all feel like we're the only person going through what we're going through at the time that we're going through it. And having somebody else there who's been through it and who understands it, it makes you feel so much more human. You're like, okay, I'm not the only person that's experiencing this. And then from like this place of, trying to figure out where we are in the world, who we are and what's happening, we also get to decide what kind of future we want to create for ourselves. And that's probably one of my favorite parts about coaching. It's like giving your clients back their power and showing them there may be a lot in the world that we can't control, but there's a lot that we can control. And let me help you see that so that you can decide what you want to create for yourself in your life.
I completely agree and I love that. Yes. I mean, when you realize that you are in control of, like you said, so much, obviously not everything, but when you even if it's something that you're not in control of, you are in control of your perspective or your mindset about that thing that you can't control. It's just so empowering. And you realize like, oh, okay, well, this might be happening and I can't control it, but I can do something over here that can help me either feel more in control or deal with uh, just the way that that thing makes me feel. So
Yeah,
I think that's so great. Um,
absolutely.
Tell me, I know that, well, you and I know that failure is, there's no such thing as failure unless you give up. But tell me about a time you felt like you failed, but you turned it into something great.
The time that I felt like I failed, it's tough because I don't really think in those terms. Like, I don't think of things as like when I'm going through something, if it's not going the way that I want it to go, I do the work of like trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this into something that benefits me. So like my line of thinking almost all the time is like, as I'm going through something, I'm trying to navigate my thoughts of like, okay, if this isn't happening the way that I want it to, how can I shift the way that I'm thinking about it to have it be exactly what I want it to be? And what I mean by that is like, I search for evidence of like how it's good for me that things aren't going the way that I want them to, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, 100%. I love that.
Well, so it's kind of tricky for me to like pinpoint one specific area where I'm like, oh, well, that was, it didn't go, because it's like an active thing that I'm doing
Mhm.
simultaneously. Like even with plans, like let's say I was going to take my kids to the zoo and all of a sudden it started to rain, or, like something like that. Like I basically will just decide that when I go to the zoo, we're going to do these certain things. And then if I have to shift gears or like do something different, I just decide that that was the best choice. And then I just have my
Right.
own back and I'm like, yeah, okay, we had to shift gears and this is what happened. And look how perfect this turned out. Even if it's like
Exactly.
a complete disaster, I can always, not always, I shouldn't say always, because that's probably not accurate or even, human. But like I try to always like turn it so that it's like, okay, how can I make this into the best, like I make the best of it is like that phrase. I don't even
For
really like
sure.
that phrase, but that's kind of the concept. It's like, I don't look at life as things being a failure. I look at them as growth, and even things, like, so an example of something that I would maybe relate to would be looking at my marriage as being a failure because I got divorced. But I quickly turned that into like, look at all of the beauty that has come out of it, the growth that I've had because of it, and looking at, the adversity that I've overcome, and then being able to lead by example and like challenge myself. So I try to flip it around. So it's like not thinking about it as a failure. And so when I think back on things, it's difficult for me to come across like or pinpoint something specific where I'm like, I felt like I didn't do that the right way, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
well, that's right. That's the whole point is when when it starts out and you're like, "Man, my marriage failed," or whatever it is, but then you realize later after going through a lot of stuff, hindsight, they say is 2020, and you can look back and be like, "Oh, you know what? That was actually really good for all parties involved. I learned so much. It's so much growth." And you really change your perspective about the thing. And so I like to ask that question because I think a lot of times, like you said, people think that they're alone and they're the only person that feels like a failure at, their marriage, or, screaming at their kids or whatever. And it's that situation where you're like, oh my gosh, I totally screwed up, or I bombed this or whatever. And then when you can get really mindful about it and understand that when you change your perspective about it and say, "Oh, okay, you know what? I realized where that was coming from, why I did that, and now you can grow and change how you feel about it the next time and catch yourself." I think that's the whole point, right? Is we're supposed to learn from the things that we air quote fail at in
Hmm.
order to grow and be the best person. So I love it. I think it's great. Um, what are you working on now, or where is your business headed?
Well, right now I do one-on-one coaching with my clients. And so at the end of October this year, I'll be looking at opening up a few more spaces for one-on-one coaching. And right now I'm focusing all of my energy on that and like growing my business in that way and learning as much as I can. And there is something in the back of my mind that says that, at some point I want to write another book, but I don't want to be quoted for that because I don't know for sure. Like it's one of those things where I'm like, that's kind of the direction that I keep going towards. It's like I have learned so much and I love sharing what I learn and sharing it in a way that makes sense for other people, like making it really digestible and really valuable so that people can learn from the things that I've experienced and help them, to shorten their path to like figuring it out. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at right now. I've just been pouring all of my energy into the clients that I have, and working on making this one-on-one coaching experience with my clients the most amazing experience that I possibly can create for them and as valuable as I can possibly make it. And then there's kind of like the thoughts in the back of my mind of maybe possibly looking at doing another book.
So cool. Yeah, no, it'll happen when the timing is right, right?
Right.
All right, so let's do a quick rapid fire. What is a book, article, person, or talk that's changed your life?
Hands down person would be Brene Brown. And I know she did a TED talk on vulnerability. So that probably,
So good.
yeah, that probably was the start of it. But then, recently I read Rising Strong, and there was so much wisdom in that book that I was like, I want to go back and reread it and reread it and reread it.
I know, I need to get it. I have it and I've read through a lot of it, but I need to get it on Audible because I just my little ADD brain doesn't like to sit and read. I like to
Yes, and
listen.
I wanna go back and listen to it over and over again. Like, I don't have it on Audible, but I love listening to books and reading them at the same time.
Oh, so interesting. That makes so much sense. Okay, what is your favorite Friday night at home?
Well, recently, Friday nights at home look much different, than they used to.
They look like
Um,
Tuesdays.
they look like every other day. No, but like, I really love doing, like, a board game with I have 2 boys that are 5 and 8, and so I love doing board games with them, or, like, snuggling up on the couch and watching a movie with them and having some popcorn, and then, just kind of enjoying that time with them and talking to them and having conversations with them at that level of, like, what 8 and 5-year-olds can do. It's so
I
cool.
know. Oh my gosh, it's so fun to talk to my 6-year-old and just see how her brain works and how she thinks about things. And, we get so caught up in the day to day and we got to get this done and that done and blah, 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 that we kind of forget to have those deep conversations where we can teach them about the world or how to think or just how to take every day. And it's just I had a conversation with my daughter the other night and I was just like, man, that was so fun and definitely want to do more of it. So I loved that you said that. What was your dream job as a kid?
Well, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but, as a
Teacher.
kid, I always wanted to be a teacher, and my sister and I would play teacher in the basement, like, all the time, and actually my sister is also a teacher, so interesting.
So funny. I always I always wanted to be an office employee. I wanted to type and fax and print. So that's funny. Um, what is the next vacation that you're planning?
Well, during a pandemic when this is being recorded, vacation isn't necessarily the top of mind. Um,
Yeah.
but we've been talking a lot about, we went to Universal Studios last year. My 2 boys and I went with my family, and they're a little bit young for some of the stuff there. And when we came back, we got really into Harry Potter. And so I would love to take them back there. So there have been some talks about that between the 3 of us, of like, maybe doing something next summer if it is possible, or even the summer after, taking them back to Universal Studios and doing like the Harry Potter world, where you can buy a wand and then
Yeah.
go and do all the spells everywhere and ride the rides, and like, you can have the butter beer and have the whole experience. So that's been kind of the talk amongst the 3 of us.
That sounds like so much fun, and your kids would obviously super love and enjoy it. So, yeah, that sounds cool. Tell me, what is your best advice to help our listeners live with audacity?
So I think my best advice is trust yourself. Trust yourself, and then always have your own back.
That's good. Explain that a little bit. Always have your own back.
So oftentimes we make choices, make decisions, I guess. So the choices are what we decide. But I think when we make decisions, a lot of times we question ourselves and we doubt ourselves. And I think one of the things that serves me really well is that when I make a decision, I decide that that's the best decision that I can make in the moment. And I have my own back. Like, I don't doubt myself. I don't question myself. I just decide that right now this is the best choice for me, and then I don't think anymore about it.
I love that. I think, man, I can't tell you how many people I've come across lately that just it's this or this or this, and they're like, "Well, I don't know, I'm gonna keep thinking about it." It's like, "Dude, just decide, and then if you don't like it, change it later." But
Yeah, and
just, like, pick one.
And if you think about how much time we spend circling around in
Yeah.
indecision, right? Where you're like, well, I don't know. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do that. Like, I don't know if I should do this, right? Like when we allow ourselves to indulge in that confusion, we just spin and it takes up so much mental energy. So
Uh-huh.
when we just decide like, okay, sometimes it's because we think, okay, well, one choice is right choice, one choice is the wrong choice. And I've really tried to get away from that line of thinking and go more along the lines of making a choice. Like just make a decision and then decide that that's the best choice for you. And if it's not, then you can make a different choice, right? Not a better choice, not the right choice, not the wrong choice, just a different choice, a different decision. And I think that that has really helped take some of that pressure off of like, you've got to do it right. Like the school decision thing,
Yes.
there was so
Uh-huh.
many people that were like, oh, I don't know what the right decision is. I don't know what the wrong choice is. Like, what if I make a mistake? And I just got to this place where I was like, I'm just going to make a decision based on what I think is best in the moment with the information I have. And then I'm
Uh-huh.
not going to think anything more about it until I need to make another decision. And until that happens, I just decide this is the best choice for my kids.
Yeah, and oh man, I'm so happy that we're talking about this and hate that it kind of, came at the end. I hope people are still listening, but I want to take a moment to really dive into this a little bit because we get so paralyzed by analysis paralysis or indecision, just it just sits on us and it feels so heavy a lot of times, but but the majority of the decisions that you have to make in your daily life, they're not life changing or life threatening, really. And so you can, like you said, you can, if you choose something and you decide, you know what, actually, that wasn't really the right choice for me, you can change it at any time. No one is holding a gun to your head being like, nope, nope, this is what you decided. And it is totally freeing when you can say, nope, this is the right thing for now, and if I need to change it later, I can. um just because like you said, it removes that right and wrong choices, and they're all right, you just have to make the best choice for right now.
Yeah, and it frees up that space then in your brain so that you can actually think clearly about other things. And like it brings you back to, I had a client today actually say this morning, she was talking about how we just like shifted one little thing and like she made a decision about something. And she was like, as soon as I made a decision, I could instantly feel the shift in my body, like how I physically felt inside. And it created so much more space for her to be able to think clearly and to be present in the moment.
Yeah. And I think too, when like, so let's say it's two choices and you pick the one on the left, it's like now that you've decided that, the whole rest of the steps light up and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. But when you stay stuck in that one spot and you dance around there for so long, it's so hard to it's it's not just hard to move forward, but it's just like you can't even see where you might be headed in your daily life because you've got to pick one or the other, and just pick one.
Yeah, because it like closes you off from your ability to be able to see the possibilities. Because the other piece
Yes.
of it is like there may be an option that you're not even considering or it's not even on your radar because you're so consumed with where you're at that you're not allowing your brain to have that space and to open up to the other possibilities.
It's so much fun though, right? When you can finally see see it light up for you and you're like, "Oh, thank goodness I finally got to this place." It's so
Yeah,
cool. It's so
absolutely.
freeing. Okay, where can people find you to get more information?
The best place to find more information about me is on my website, which I have been told is a very beautiful website. So
It is. It is so beautiful.
so if even to just check it out to see how beautiful it is. No, I'm just kidding. So that's the best place to find information. So the web address is www.stephanie stephanie dash Nichols nichols.com.
Okay, perfect. And what are your social media handles if anyone wants to follow you there?
So I hang out mostly on Facebook, and I have a Facebook group. I have a private group, and I also have like Stephanie Nichols Coaching. is my Facebook business page. So you can find updates and links to the private Facebook page through that. But I have a private group called Flourish After Divorce. And we focus on all of the pieces of like, building a relationship with yourself again, feeling in control of your life, co-parenting with calm, raising resilient kids. And so that's like a really safe space. And it's a closed group where it's all divorced moms. We come together to support each other and ask questions. And I provide some, advice and insight and things like that.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. Well, then, ladies, if you are about to, or you're in the middle of divorce, or maybe you're done and you're just looking for somebody to support you, you are looking for a place to be able to commiserate and adjust your thoughts on the whole thing, definitely check out Stephanie. I think you'll find exactly what you need from her. Thank you so much for being here. It was so much fun, and man, I hope that you totally change the lives of women having to face this, whether it's their choice or not, because it's just it's so valuable to have someone that gets it and understands how out of sorts you feel when you go through something like that.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking with you today.
Hey, Boo Boo! Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you found value in this episode, do me a solid favor and take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me. I love watching you grow and live up to your greatest potential. Let me cheer you on.